going on, everybody? It's your boy, Rudy Malumba.
And I'm John Carp.
And you're tuned into the 48 podcast. Let's get right into the shit. This episode, we're going to do law number 7 and law number 8. Law number 7 is get others to do the work for you, but always take the credit. You read the judgment real quick. Use the wisdom, knowledge, and legwork of other people to further your own cause. Not only will such assistance save you valuable time and energy, it will give you a godlike aura of efficiency and speed. In the end, your helpers will be forgotten and you will be remembered. Never do yourself what others can do for you.
All right. And the example he gives in this in this book is well, we all know who Thomas Edison is, right?
He invented the light bulb.
Well, so they say. But Nikola Tesla might be someone that not very many people know, who's probably responsible for even more inventions than Thomas Edison is.
Not just the car? You didn't do that, did he?
No, not the car. You're thinking of like, you mean like the Model T? That was...
Because there's a Tesla car out there.
No, that's just... That,
he was long dead.
Yeah, no, he just... Elon Musk just named the company after him, that's all. But in any case, Nikola Tesla was a Serbian inventor and scientist. He's most well known for coming up with the concept of alternating current, which ended up being mixed with Edison's idea of a direct current, and they ended up being combined for AC/DC.
Definitely.
So, and there's a ton of examples we could use for Tesla not observing this particular law because he got screwed left and right by so many people. But I'm just going to focus in on one that he mentions in the book, and it was when Nikola Tesla first came to the U.S. He was a Serbian, and when he first came to the U.S., he started working for Edison, and he was putting in 18-hour days to improve one of Edison's inventions, which was the Edison dynamo, and Edison didn't really believe that Tesla could really improve upon it, but he said, if you can, that's $50,000 for you for it. So Tesla, as I said, put 18-hour days to improve this device, and sure enough, he did. And when he did, he said, "Hey, look, Edison, I made your Edison dynamo work now." And Edison was like, "Oh, great, cool." And Tesla said, "So where's my $50,000?
Where's my money?"
And Edison looked at Tesla and he said, "Tesla, you don't understand our American humor." And he just gave him, a very small raise, and that was it. And that should have been the moment when Tesla left the Edison company.
Yeah.
But no, he didn't. Eventually, they actually went to honor him with the Edison Medal of Achievement or something. Mm-hmm. And eventually, this is when he finally got wise to his ways, and Tesla refused the award because why would he want to wear this pin for a company that screwed him over more ways than one? So, taking a page from Tesla's life, we should be very wary of people who perform this law on us, because there are plenty of examples, I would think, even today, of people taking advantage of one's hard work and profiting off of it.
Taking the credit for it.
Yeah.
It's interesting what Green says in this book, because he says the credit for an invention is just as important as the invention itself. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because, obviously the book kind of goes through some of Tesla's trials and the things that kind of because he died broke. He had no money. And that was around the same time that they honored him and he refused. It's interesting because he invented a bunch of things, again, revolving around the alternating current thing, which actually led to other discoveries like the radio and all those other things. And people just came in and used his all the hard work that he had and got recognized for other things. So there's a bunch of people. I guess my question is, I was trying to think of the direct application of this. I kind of feel like Tesla was just in a bad spot. I feel like there's not a lot he could have done to get out of his situation. He was just a guy who was kind of wrong place, wrong time kind of thing. So I was kind of wondering, like, how would you handle this kind of situation? Let's say you get a job somewhere, you get told, I'm going to give you $50,000 if you figure this thing out. You work hard, you do all of that. And let's say, fine, you do get wise to it and you do leave, because that's what Tesla did. He left eventually. Someone else, I think there was this Westinghouse guy, he kind of took him on and said, I'm going to pay you whatever, a certain percentage for everything you create. So he worked there for a while, and he was owed like $12 million.
Right.
And I think JP Morgan came in and bought that company up. And the guy was pretty much telling Tesla, like, I can't afford to pay you what I owe you, so I'm going to give you $200,000. So he got that.
Right.
But I mean, so I guess in general, going through all of that, how do you think you would have handled that situation better, given, again, us just being aware of what this law is and kind of moving from there?
I would employ Law 3, as a matter of fact, conceal your intentions. To be honest with you, I think maybe Nikola Tesla, he may have been fooled by Edison the first go around, because as far as he could tell, okay, this guy seems reasonable, right?
Yeah. And he was known,
right? And he was known, but he shouldn't. But at that point, once he realized, okay, he wasn't going to get his $50,000, okay, fine, keep working for this Edison guy. But next time you have a great idea, don't give him your best idea. There was a excuse me, there was a guy, sticky notes, right?
Yeah.
So he used to work for the guy who came up with that. He used to work for a DuPont chemical company, and he was tasked to find a very super sticky glue, right? And he worked very, very hard to find this glue, and the best that he could come up with was the kind of glue that you would use for a Post-it. Well, it wasn't what DuPont wanted. So eventually they fired him, and he went home and was just like, lost his job. What was he going to do? And he ended up putting that type of glue on just a piece of paper and just wrote a note to his wife and stuck it somewhere. And then, like, his wife was like, "Where did you get this thing?" Yeah. And she's like, "This would be great to just leave notes around, on the fridge or whatever." And he's like, "Well, I just kind of made it." And then he realized, he's like, "Wait a second, I have like $1 million idea right here."
Yeah.
So he just went into business himself, and that's where we get Post-its and sticky notes and stuff.
Yeah,
that's where it comes from. So I think if you're working for a company of any kind, and you have a great idea, don't give them your greatest idea.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Work for your employer. Do well by them.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, if you've got a really great idea, keep that to yourself and develop it.
Absolutely.
That's what I would say.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, because ultimately, what this law points to is, like Green goes into later on, is be aware of the fact that there's vultures out there. There's people who he kind of compared it to the jungle, right? So the jungle, you have your animals who do the killing. Then there's other animals that just thrive off other kills, like vultures, hyenas, animals like that. So I guess what Green was trying to say is be aware of that. Don't try to fight it. Kind of just, recognize that it's there and accept it and use it to your advantage. If it serves you to do it, then do it. And I feel like that's kind of what it points to. I think I would have done the same thing in terms of Tesla's, situation. I think it would have been smarter for him to kind of, conceal his intentions, try to get what he wants from Edison, and then keep it moving, because that's essentially who he was. He was kind of, Edison brought him in, and Edison was essentially his mentor. So he was in that position for a reason. So I feel like that's kind of what he should have done with it. But I agree with you on that. But he also, at the same time, wasn't outshining the master. So he was following the first law, and I think he just didn't know. He wasn't aware of things that are out there. He wasn't aware of
this book hadn't been published yet.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
He hadn't read the 48 Laws of Power.
Yeah, or listened to the podcast.
Absolutely. So yeah, like I was saying, it points to the realities of them being, just the vultures being out there, and just kind of adjusting to that. Now, I kind of have I don't know. I like the law. I think it's important because it's good to be aware of that. I mean, this happens in real life all the time. I think if you watch out for it, you'll be able to see it everywhere. And I think it's good to be aware of it. But I kind of feel like in the book, he was talking about directly and indirectly taking from people. I think this is something that fits in certain contexts, but doesn't always fit in general. So I guess what I'm trying to say is he talks about us being aware of vultures, and then he kind of goes into us giving us a choice, like you can participate in it if it serves you. And then he talks about another technique that people use, which is taking from the past, right? So if you don't want to combat angry people, you don't build up a reputation of being the kind of person that steals, you can take from the past. And the way I look at that is it's something that everyone does. It's something that's important to do. That's how we learn and all those different things. But for me, it was just kind of all over the place. I kind of feel like he just brought up a bunch of different examples of people taking from other people, some in good context, some in bad. The good context that I saw was in terms of, he has another book called Mastery, and he talks about the process to mastery. Obviously, one of the steps is to get a mentor, right? And the reason you get a mentor is because when you're trying to become a master, it takes a lot of years to get good at something. So one of the shortcuts is to find someone who's already established within that field and get as much as you can from them. Now, the person who's the master, if they're in a position where they've already built up the reputation of being a master, they've already done a bunch of different things, it works to their advantage to employ people under them who are willing to do anything to learn from them. So those people can then say, okay, you do my work for me. And then if your work is great, then I get the credit and you learn. So over the years, when, I get done with it, you will eventually be known as the person that worked under this person, and you'll kind of get the credit a little bit. But I kind of feel like it works in that context.
I think so too. I think you touched on a couple of good points. Number one kind of goes back to the old saying, why reinvent the wheel? If somebody's already been there, has already invented it,
exactly. Yeah.
Why are you going back to the drawing board? Just take from that and then go on to the next step.
Absolutely.
Or to improve it or what have you, or come up with something new. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I think that's actually how we progress as a society.
Absolutely.
I think it's very important. And then the second point you touched on was, working for somebody who's already been there or has had experience in whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, because that's ultimately what a company is. You have a bunch of people who work for you. Mm-hmm. They're not going to get the credit in terms of like, oh, well, we've increased our sales. They're not going to go to, Fred the salesman.
Yeah.
They're going to go to the manager or the guy running, the whole company as a whole. But they can't possibly, companies can't possibly, reward every single employee under their, who's working for them. That's just not feasible.
Yeah.
So that there's instances where it's understandable why, others do work for other people's credit.
Absolutely.
Basically.
Yeah.
There's understandable aspects to that. However, I think when it does come to Law 7, I think you really need to thank the people who get you to your desired goal, whatever that might be.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you're a musician, if you're a solo artist, right, but you have a backing band, during the show, give a shout out to the drummer, the bass player, the keyboard player, whatever, right? Because that's just common human decency.
Yeah.
Thank the house, the sound guy.
And I kind of feel like people can see the band. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
might as well give them credits.
Of course.
People don't attribute to you singing, doing drums and guitar.
Yeah, it's very foolhardy to say that, oh, you accomplished all this by yourself, because that's never the case.
Yeah.
For anything. So I think people should give credit where credit's due. So I'd say in a day-to-day thing, I don't really think the Law 7 applies.
Yeah.
But like I was saying in the company stance, sometimes it's one of those things that ends up happening just because of the circumstances.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's The one thing I took away from the Edison story, I kind of feel like the book was kind of praising Edison in a weird way. They're kind of saying, you know, he's kind of the winner, and Tesla's kind of the loser. And I think that was the case, kind of short term wise. I think over the course of time, I think a lot of people know who Tesla is, especially if you're in in the sciences or you've taken chemistry or not chemistry, physics. You know,
yeah, his name's getting out there more and more.
Yeah, he definitely did a lot of things, and I think if people are aware of the Edison Tesla story, you'd kind of regard Edison as kind of a scummy dude.
Yeah, definitely.
So I just thought that was interesting because and also when Green kind of goes into taking from the past and stuff, I think that comes with kind of conditions because again, if you go out and you write Romeo and Juliet, people they'll be like, what are you, I mean, this has already been published, this is already out there. So I guess that was my problem with direct and indirect. I kind of feel like, okay, so there's a modern example. I'm a big comedy guy, watch a lot of young comedians and everything like that. Years ago, maybe 5 to 10 years ago, Carlos Mencia came out and did pretty much line to line he lifted a joke from Bill Cosby. This was back when Bill Cosby was a hero too. So, and everyone in that era who grew up kind of saw that it was from his special back in '83, which was a massive. That special got him the Cosby Show. So it was a massive special that a bunch of people had seen, and Mencia went out and did the joke. So I kind of feel like with the past, especially in today's era, it's like we're all or the past is at our fingertips much easier than it was back in Edison's days or whatever. But even back then, people who just looked things up would figure out that, oh, this person is lifting directly from the past. So I kind of feel like the actual the story that he told about Edison and Tesla is more of an example of a direct, hey, I'm taking your, you know what I mean? I'm taking what you worked so hard for and I'm crediting myself, when I feel like it works better indirectly. It works better if you studied Shakespeare for years and then write your own book based on some of the same principles Shakespeare used. Or you're a comedian, you study Dave Chappelle, you study all the greats, and then, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like it works better in that way and in that indirect way, and it's more, I feel like if in that context, this law applies 100%. It's essentially just learn. Just go out there and learn from other people's mistakes, learn from things other people have done, and build on it. That's what we're doing here. I mean, we're basing our podcast off of a book that was written in 1997. So we're essentially going back to the past, but we're not just saying this is our work. You know what I mean? We're saying we're taking his work and we're adding our points of view to it. You know? Yeah,
and I think in that case, yes, this law is very applicable, and it's something to abide by. You know, so long as you're giving credit, like we're obviously giving credit to Robert Greene. We did not write this book.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the difference between, folks like Carl Mencia, right?
Yeah.
And someone like
he's hated, by the way. Still.
Oh yeah.
All this happened
despised.
10 years ago. But,
and he's despised by just about every comedian.
Yeah.
And the same thing goes for hip hop artists. I mean, give a lot of hip hop artists credit for sourcing where they're getting their samples from. Absolutely. I know Kanye does, and I applaud him for that. But there are others who don't. And some of them are well known, and I'm sure Rudy knows who I'm talking about.
I've actually a real quick funny story. There's a song by NWA called "Dope Man," right. Dr. Dre made the beat, and the beat is this. So he added. It's a sample of like a funk song from back in the day, but he added like some 808s and kick drums and stuff like that to it. So, and the beat is crazy. It's great for like a hip hop. If you like hip hop, you'll love it. And I'm sure if you're listening, you listen to hip hop, then you're aware of the song. But the beat's great. It was made back in the 80s. So Kanye West, this is early Kanye West, before he really got famous, he was making a bunch of beats for a bunch of the Rockefeller rappers, Jay-Z, Freeway, all those guys. And there's a video of him playing the Dope Man beat. Nothing added to it. It's literally the same beat, right? And he's just playing the beat for Jay-Z or something. And Jay-Z's like, oh my God, this beat's crazy. You know what I mean? Kanye, you're a genius. And there's no change to that beat. At some point, Kanye actually gave that beat to someone and someone rapped over it. And then I think people figured out, oh, this is the same song as before. I don't know what happened with it in terms of licensing and stuff, but it's essentially the same exact beat. I just thought it was funny when I saw that video because I was aware of the song, and I was like, he's literally playing someone else's work and taking all the credit for it himself. And like my gut reaction was like, that's an extremely scummy thing to do. I think most people would react the same way.
Yeah, it's just, it's just one of those things where, it's I think knowing this law will help you to protect yourself, like in so many ways. Like we talked about hip hop, like, okay, if you're a musician, get your stuff copyrighted, right? If you come up with an invention like Tesla, get a patent, right? If you're going to get married, get a prenup, it's stuff like that. Like protect yourself because, I know the prenup thing is controversial, but I mean, I mean, shoot me, but I'm with it. I'm just saying, things happen, and in life, people change, and then you don't exactly, I'm not going to say that you don't know the person that you're marrying, but actually, in some cases, some people don't know the person that they're marrying, and but also too, if you don't take the steps to protect yourself from people who are going to take advantage of your hard work, then, like you said, there's vultures out there. They're going to take advantage of that, you know?
Absolutely. And another thing that I kind of picked up on as I was, reviewing the material and just kind of reading it and stuff is about how these laws, even though on the surface it's, again, laws of power, and a lot of them seem like it serves your ego, and a lot of them it seems like it's very selfish and kind of ruthless in a way. I think it's interesting that a lot of these principles actually have different aspects of like Taoist and Buddhist kind of philosophy. Now, when you think of Taoism, the whole idea is be formless. And there's actually a law of power. The last law is be formless or something like that. But it's essentially be like water, right? So water, it fits in any container you put it in. It goes with the flow, all that other stuff. So it's essentially like don't fight things. Things are what they are. You know what I mean? There's vultures out there. You can't change that. So don't waste energy trying to fight against that. Instead, go with it. Accept the fact that there's that and let it serve you. So if you are going to take things from people, I think if, that's kind of on a scale. It's like do whatever you're comfortable with doing, but at least be aware it's out there and go with it, let it make you better instead of resisting it. I feel like Buddhist philosophy is the same thing, where it's like, this is out there, I'm going to accept it, I'm not going to fight against it, I'm just going to work with it, work with the flow of it.
Right.
So I think that's an interesting thing to think of when we're reviewing these laws, is that, the further we go with it, because a lot of these laws are like that.
Yeah.
I guess I go ahead and talk about the reversal a little bit. Robert Greene talked about the times when taking credit for work that others have done is not wise. The example he used was Henry Kissinger and Nixon. So Nixon was, I think they're talking about going to China,
opening up trade with China,
trade up with China and everything like that. And what people didn't know is actually Henry Kissinger was behind a lot of that, and he did a bunch of the legwork to do that. But Nixon ended up getting the credit. So essentially, what Greene was trying to say is, don't be wise about when you take the credit versus when you don't, because in some cases it actually works better to not outshine the master. So to give the president all the credit, and then you take the credit for things your underlings do, but don't take the credit for things that people above you do. Then in the future, people will eventually find out, and they'll be like, "Oh, he did that, and we didn't even know," etc. So that was the reversal to law number 7.
It's almost like the reversal to law 7 is law 1.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's like, it's funny because in certain ways, these laws work hand in hand with one another, as we're going to see going into the next law with this one.
Sure.
And then in other cases, they completely contradict each other.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what life is.
I was going to say that's the nature of life, is it not?
100%. All right, let's go ahead and skip on to law number 8, law ocho. Law number 8, make other people come to you. Use bait if necessary. The judgment is, when you force the other person to act, you are the one in control. It is always better to make your opponent come to you abandoning his own plans in the process. Lure him with fabulous gains, then attack. You hold the cards.
All right, and the example that Green gives in the book is when Napoleon was first defeated and sent to exile on Elba, which is an island right off the coast of Italy, for those who aren't familiar. And at the time, during the Congress of Vienna, this is in 1814, everybody was super excited, and they were, that, Napoleon's finally gone, right? And they were carving up Napoleon's former empire that he had built. And but one guy seemed to be very cool the entire time, and it's this guy. I'll go ahead and say his full name once, but it's Charles Maurice de Talleyrand Perigord, okay? But from here on out, I'm just going to call him Talleyrand because that's a mouthful of a name. So anyway, Talleyrand just kind of was walking around like, it's almost like he knew something was going on and something was about to go on. Because as it turned out, Napoleon escaped the island of Elba, which was, by the way, guarded by a fleet of British ships all around the island, and he slipped out in broad daylight, came back to France, and raised a small army that eventually grew and grew and grew, and and it was basically crowned himself the Emperor of France again for a period of, I think it was about 3 months or something.
100 days.
100 days, about 3 months. And then, until, of course, he was finally defeated at the Battle of Waterloo and then sent into exile forever on the island of St. Helena, which is, for those of you who don't know geography, that's like right between South America and Africa. We're in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean. And that's where he stayed forever. And Talleyrand, it turns out that this whole escape that Napoleon had conducted was actually planned by Talleyrand. What Talleyrand did was he knew that everyone in Europe at the time, all the European nations, were just confident that Napoleon was done for. Talleyrand was I think wisely not so confident of that, because let's bear in mind that Elba is not that far from the Italian coast. Like, if Napoleon wanted to, he could come back to Europe very easily. So he wanted Napoleon to be much further away and let him truly be, a figure from the past, so to speak. So what he did was he convinced, I think it was the Austrian minister and the British government, to do this sort of fake escape from Napoleon in a way. So the Austrian minister went to the island of Elba and started talking to Napoleon, saying, "Hey, your popularity is really skyrocketing right now.
Gassing him up.
Yeah, exactly. I can sneak you out of here pretty easily around these British ships, right?" And Napoleon, definitely wanting to be, king of Europe, right? He was like, "All right, let's do it, man." So he went on aboard this Austrian ship, and of course the British knew what was going on, so they, could obviously see this ship was escaping, but they had orders, just let it go.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing was planned.
Wow.
And Talleyrand knew that the French economy was in such disrepair that they would never be able to put up a full-scale fight against any other European nation. And this whole return to power for Napoleon was doomed to failure from the beginning, and it was planned that way.
This is such an incredible story because, again, like what I'd mentioned about formlessness and kind of the being like water, kind of just going with things. Talleyrand, it's first of all, it's interesting that you read all these stories about specifically, in France back in, when King Louis and all those guys were king and stuff. Whenever anyone, sneezed wrong, they'd get their head cut off. You know what I mean? But Napoleon was able to thug it out for years. They sent him out to an island, and then he did all this. They sent him out to another. Why didn't they just cut his head off? You know what I mean? I don't know if it was. I don't know.
They talked about that though, and they just decided to exile. I don't get that either.
Yeah,
I was thinking that too. And I've always thought that though, ever since I was a little kid and was first learning about Napoleon,
Yeah.
I didn't get that either.
It's kind of bizarre, but I
Yeah.
mean, Talleyrand was the one saying, "Guys, I don't think this is a good idea to send him to Elba because, again, like you said, it was pretty close to Italy, and it's pretty close to where they were. I think they were in Vienna, right? Or
They were in Vienna, which is Austria, but
Austria.
Austria's right next door to Italy. It
Yeah.
would not have taken long for Napoleon to get to Vienna.
And they know Napoleon. They know his character. They know, what drives him.
Yeah.
And he was a guy who was very much, he loved the attention. He loved being, his position kind of got to his head, right? So,
Yeah.
Now this story is incredible because I brought up formlessness and being like water and how you should kind of use, accept things the way they are. And if you do want something to happen, use what you have in front of you, right? So in Talleyrand's case, it would have taken too much energy for him to argue this point, right? So he said, all right, I'm just going to, knowing what I know about, Napoleon and knowing what I know about the French, the country of France and the kind of resources we have and stuff. I know his character. I know Napoleon's character. All I have to do is stroke his ego this way, and he's going to do A, B, C, and D, which is also another application that I've kind of learned from this book is it's really a good idea, and there's a law about this actually later on, but it's a really good idea to kind of mute your little things like your insecurities, things that are clearly your vices. It's really good to either get them in check or to kind of mute them in a way where it's not that obvious, because it's really easy. Because again, like we said in the last law, there's vultures out there, period. There's people out there who their entire lives is to use you. You know what I mean? It's to take advantage of you. So it's good to not give them more tools. So it's good to kind of keep things in check, be a little bit more wary about how you present yourself and the kind of things you say and all that other stuff. So, but that's what Talleyrand did. He went back. He knew what he would have to do in order to get Napoleon to do A, B, C, or D. Napoleon did it. He knew the resources France had, and he knew that Napoleon was the kind of guy who would react in a certain way, knowing that we don't have that many resources and all that stuff. I'm Napoleon. You know what I mean? My ego's kind of on another stage. I could do this. Other people couldn't, but I can. And boom, Napoleon went in there, acted aggressive action. And, he got a bunch of people to react. And then after a while, it reached a peak and then it went down. I don't know. I just think it's interesting the way Talleyrand did it. He moved very strategically. He was very long-term about it, and he used people's weaknesses to his advantage without doing a lot of work. Because he could have been out there, he could have yelled at the people, no, this isn't correct because A, B, C, or D, we should do things this way, but he knew they weren't going to listen, and he didn't fight that. And he just went along with it and put on a pretty strategic little thing there.
It's almost like this law to me says, use people's greed to their disadvantage. And the thing that comes to my mind most clearly is in several parts of Africa, the Bushmen there, they'll employ this trick in order to find water, because when a drought comes, water becomes very difficult to find. So there's this trick they use where they'll get some kind of treat, some kind of fruit or something, and they'll stick it inside like a hollowed out log, right? Something that's appealing to a baboon, right? Mm-hmm. And a baboon will reach inside of this hole and grab the treat, and they'll be able to fit their hand inside of it, but while holding on to this treat and trying to pull their hand out of this hole in the log, they can't. They're stuck. Now, if the baboon wants to be free of this trap, all it has to do is let go of the treat, and it'll be able to pull its hand out. But the baboon is so consumed with it wants this treat by its own greed that it won't do it by nature. Mm-hmm. So that's when the Bushmen come along and they capture the baboon and they stick it in a cage, and then they feed it salty snacks or whatever to get it thirsty, and then they'll let the baboon go, and the baboon will go straight to the nearest watering source, and they just follow the baboon. And that's how they find water.
That's a pretty genius thing to do. Wow.
You're from Africa. Yeah, you ever heard of that?
I've heard of the Bushmen, and I've heard of like other things that they've done. I think a lot of them are in South Africa.
Yeah, it's like it's Southern Africa. Yeah,
but I've heard of like some of the other tactics they use and stuff. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but yeah,
they use a lot. They're very clever people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow, that's very interesting, man. Well, yeah, it's interesting the thing about greed, because I think in a lot of the examples used in the book, greed was definitely a factor, and I think in general, your vices. You know what I mean? It's like this is a good law to use on people who have, you know. Who you know either have kind of inflamed egos or kind of are you know selfish or greedy, you know, and things like that. I think another example I liked in the book that they used was what pickpocketers do, where they actually come into like a popular area, like a little an airport or bus terminal or something like that, and they put a sign that says "Beware of pickpocketers." People see the sign, they feel for their pockets.
Oh yeah.
And then as soon as you do that, the pickpocketer's nowhere to go and nowhere to hit.
It reminds me of when I was living in Orlando. Because Rudy, you and I have talked about this. I lived in a very rough part of Orlando.
Yeah.
And but like the funny thing is, neither me or my neighbors ever got robbed. Mm-hmm. But the gated community that was in the community not too far away, they got robbed all the time. Why do you suppose? Who wants to rob from the lower income place?
Exactly.
You want to go to the gated community where people have a lot of money.
A good way to combat that again is to work on yourself and work on some of the vices you have and stuff. In the book, it talks a lot about learning how to master your emotions and not be influenced by anger or other things like that. The book also goes into when to use this law and when not to, which kind of goes into the reversal a little bit.
Why don't you go ahead and say the reversal, because I have a great example of that dichotomy.
Okay, yeah, definitely. So the reversal talks about when to use aggressive action versus when to use effective action. Effective action is to really not use much of your energy and to let the other person's energy guide them towards where you want them to be. But there are instances when you should use kind of aggressive action versus this effective action. The effective action you use to bring people towards you when you're kind of working in a space where you have less power than them, or you're in a position you have less resources than the other person. So it works to your advantage to use their energy against them. That way, when they come to you, they're exhausted and you're full. So it's an emptiness versus fullness kind of thing. But you can use aggressive action when you have more resources than the other person, and you don't want to waste any time. Because if you sit back and you wait, then the people might gain more resources. But if you just attack them directly, then you'll be out on top. So that's what the reversal goes into, is to just kind of know when to use kind of tactics and to kind of think more long term when you're in a position of when you have less versus when you're full, you're working fullness, emptiness kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's why. Long term, Hitler was not successful because in the early part of World War II, Hitler employed what's known as the Blitzkrieg, where they just stormed the countryside with tanks and planes, and they just bombarded the place.
Yeah.
And it caught the Belgians, it caught the French, and then the British off guard because it was just overwhelming and all at once, right?
Yeah.
And that worked for him very quickly, and that was a good move for him to pull. But the problem with Hitler was he got, he got a little greedy, and he had signed a peace treaty with the USSR that he wasn't going to, attack them during that time. But Hitler, was really keen on propelling this German policy called Lebensraum, which is German for living space. The way German agriculture was set up, they needed more land to fulfill their demands agriculturally. So Lebensraum was basically the idea of take the land from less desirable people, aka the Slavs and the communists, which the USSR's Russians were at the time
Yeah.
were communists and they're a Slavic people.
Yeah.
The idea was take their land, slaughter the inhabitants, and use that for agriculture. So he got very greedy about that and started and just said, "All right, I think it's time to attack the USSR now."
Wow.
But in doing that, he had a two front war now,
Yeah.
and then that's when he was just reaching for far too soon, and that's you can't fight a two front war that long.
Yeah.
It's got to be a quick war if you're going to do that.
Yeah.
You got to do it very quickly, and he didn't do it quick enough.
Wow.
And then the Japanese bombed the U.S., and then we got involved, and
They
it just
didn't
got
want
worse.
nothing.
And then once we got into Normandy, that was it.
That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was funny because it's actually the same thing that led to Germany's defeat in the First World War, and because they thought, well, if we attack, because they were surrounded on each side, and they're like, well, if we can knock out the Belgians and the French and the Germans, and the British real quick, then we can focus on the Eastern Front.
Yeah.
It's called the Schlieffen Plan, and
A lot of German words.
yeah. And
today.
it didn't.
I'm going to work that in the conversation at some point. What is it? The Liefen, the first one, the living
Schlieffen.
space.
Oh, Liefenstein.
I'm going to work that in conversation in the next week
Yeah,
with people.
and I'm sure I'm butchering some aspect of the pronunciation, but
Yeah.
I'm just going off of what I heard auditory.
Absolutely.
But because I didn't take German, but in any case, then the other plan was the Schlieffen
Yeah. Okay. The Schlieffen plan.
Schlieffen Plan, and getting a German lesson here.
See, this is and I think it all relates back to the general theme for this law specifically is that because the thing that got Hitler was his greed, right? He kind of it's important to approach things by having kind of a long-term minded plan versus your emotions. So I think for him, he was at a point where he was like, wow, this strategy that we're using is effective. It's working. And then he just kind of got drunk off of the power that he was getting with that. And he was like, you know what, since it's working here, let's use it here too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that eventually was his downfall, his greed. I think if you go back, there's got to be tons more examples of kind of, they talk about the 7 deadly sins, but when we think about all those different trappings, there's got to be a lot more stories of people who got defeated because of, whatever, all the different 7 deadly sins. It's interesting because we looked at a few of these examples and it's greed and everything else like that.
And it's interesting
not thinking long term.
It's interesting to see people who actually do conform to this, like Washington did during the American Revolution, where Washington won very few of the battles that he engaged in during the American Revolution, but he basically sent the British on such a cat and mouse chase that the British ended up losing their resolve and just said, you know what, forget it. We're wasting way too much money.
Yeah.
And he had the perfect circumstance to do it because he was on familiar territory, the colonies, right? He knew the land, and all he had to do was just outlast the British resolve. And the British eventually pulled out because it was costing them way too much money.
Wow.
It was like, this ain't worth it after a while. So that's really how we won the war.
Yeah.
And it's funny because during the Vietnam War, the Viet Cong pulled the same exact tactic on us.
On the U.S.?
Oh, yeah.
That's crazy how things are circle like that.
Oh, yeah.
Because it took us years.
Yeah.
And then we
were there for
left.
10 to 15 years, somewhere in that range. I can't remember off the top of my head, but we were there for, maybe it was more like 8 years.
Yeah.
But still, that's a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was more like 8 years because, it was 8 years. But in any case, we were in there for way too long, and all the Viet Cong had to do was just wait us out.
And then we were wasting too much money. We were kind of wearing ourselves thin. It's the same. The Washington story.
Yeah.
Washington example is brilliant because there weren't as many troops. Washington didn't have a lot of people.
Yeah.
So that gave him an opportunity to kind of slither here, slither there, without kind of leaving a lot of a trace. It's like, even though there weren't as many of them, it was more effective for them to do what they did with the few amount of people that they had. So actually, the British were at a disadvantage because there's too many people.
Yeah.
But
it was when I was researching this particular law for today's podcast, I just so happened to be in a bookstore. It immediately made me think of Sun Tzu's The Outer War. Yeah. And serendipitously, I went to where it was, the book, right? Yeah. I picked it up, and I'm like, I know he mentions it in here somewhere. And I just opened the book, and the page I opened to was this page. Those who first position themselves in an advantageous place and await opponents there are prepared so the troops are relaxed. If the opponents are in an advantageous position, then you should not go to them, but withdraw your troops to another base, making it appear you will not oppose their army. Opponents will then think you have no strategy and will come and attack you. Then you can turn things around and make opponents tired without wearing yourself out.
See, you blew my mind with that.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm one of these people who, the way I look at situations is, I don't think anything happens just to happen. I think there's always a reason behind things, right?
Right.
So the fact that because again, this might seem like whatever, and I know people who are super mathematically inclined and sciencey will be like, oh, the odds of that. But it's like, in general, I mean, it's very serendipitous. That's all I can say.
It is, and
it
very,
means something. I don't know what it means.
I mean,
maybe we should be in the army or something. Or we should be military strategists.
I'll say that I'm more of a skeptic, so I'm going to disagree with you. But it is very serendipitous that I did happen to open to that page.
That's so crazy. If that happened to me, I would have been running around going like, I don't know, I would have been on some conspiracy theory or something.
Well,
like
you know how the mind is. You'll find a way to make a connection, even if there isn't a connection there.
Absolutely.
That's how the human brain works.
That's how it is, man.
I could have opened to another page and probably been like, oh, wow, look at that.
Yeah, look at what it says on there.
Exactly.
It says the word "the," and I was saying "the" like 50 times 2 days ago. How weird is that?
Exactly. Yeah, it's one of those things, I think. But so apart from warfare, because we're being warfare heavy on this particular law, do you think that there's, like in a day-to-day life, do you think you could use this particular law?
See, that's interesting. I think so. I think you can use it. I think you can. I mean, it's all about. It's all about it's all about being strategic and not exerting a lot of energy on things. But I don't know. I mean, I can't think of a specific situation.
You know, I just came up with one, literally just sitting right here.
Okay.
It's kind of like dating.
It's kind of like dating.
Yeah. You know what I mean, man?
Okay. How so?
Well, okay. So, if you're like at a bar or something, right?
Yeah.
And you're kind of just hanging out, and you see this girl that takes interest in you, right?
Okay.
And you notice that she's like, okay,
she's giving you the eyes.
Yeah, she wants you to approach. Okay, so you approach her and you make your presence known. Hi, I'm John, so and so, right? Yeah. And then you go away, right? And you go talk to another girl, or you go do whatever it is you're doing. And then, but this other girl's still watching you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then you occasionally go back and be like, hey, how you doing? And then you go away.
Yeah.
You go somewhere else, do your thing. Because I know we mentioned this before. If you just hover around that girl, she's going to be like, okay, this guy, he wants me too much, right?
Yeah.
But if you kind of play this like, I'm baiting you, like, come with me, honey, kind of a thing, she's more apt to fall under your sway in a way. It's the same. I think it applies there.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to the Nina de L'Enclos, whatever example.
Yeah.
Concealing your intentions, where you're actually. I mean, okay. So one thing Robert Greene said in that chapter was that dependency is kind of the antithesis of power, right? So So if you're there and she sees you hovering around and you're kind of being clumsy with your words and you just come off like you want it too bad, she'll be like, no, I'm not gonna waste my time here. But if you're going around, you're more aloof. You know what I mean? You're kind of giving her the thing where it's like, I don't really, you know what I mean? Like, you're cool and all that, but I don't need you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you're doing a bunch of other things. Then that's when, you know what I mean? That aura starts kind of.
Yeah,
you start being appealing because you don't have that dependency.
Yeah,
and that's kind of what that guy did in that Ninon de L'Enclos story until he told the girl he loved her. But I think that's a very good. And so what you're doing is you're baiting her by, you're using.
You're almost like you're baiting her by coming off as being uninterested when in actuality you're actually interested.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of a roundabout way to get someone's attention, but it's how, people do respond to that.
It's effective.
Yeah.
I think it might work in terms of jobs too, maybe.
How so?
So let's say I'm going to commit. I'm going to fully commit here because I had a quick idea. So let's say, boom, you have a job interview.
Right.
And you go to the job interview, you do your thing or whatever, and then you go like, there's like 5 other people who need me and stuff. And then you're kind of aloof in that way. Like you come off serious, but you let them know that you're wanted elsewhere.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe that. I don't know if that fully works. It's almost the same as your girl example, except it's a company.
Yeah, I don't know. It depends on the company. Sometimes the company will go, well, fine, we already have however many candidates.
Yeah, we don't need you that much. But
you've got to be a pretty impressive person to pull that off.
You have to be like Bill Gates or something.
You've got to be like someone really remarkable.
See, I think overall we get the concept. And I completely understand. I mean, I see this application. I see people using this in everyday life. I think it's all a matter of being. It's all a matter of really all it is using other people's weaknesses against them.
Yeah,
and making so it's like judo. Judo. You don't actually exert force onto people. You use their force against them.
Right,
and you put them in a position that you want them to be in.
Exactly. So. Yeah, and and that's. I'm glad you bring that up because make no mistake. Some very, shifty people will use this on you and other people. So it's something to look out for.
Exactly.
You're just talking about job interviews. I had this supposed job interview today that ended up being nothing more than a pyramid scheme.
Really?
Oh yeah.
See, why did I keep bringing up job interviews?
I don't know, man. But it was super. Like this guy was telling me. He goes, oh, okay, so you got to hear this one. So it was basically because I'm looking to make some extra money, right? Yeah, so I'd heard about this opportunity of basically selling insurance, right?
Oh, I know the company.
Huh?
I know the company.
You know the company?
I do. I know the company.
Well, maybe we'll announce the company in a minute, but because I don't care. They people need to be watch out for these people. But in any case, so this guy was explaining to me, exactly what they do, and I'm like, okay. So I asked him one question. I said, so how do you get your clients, right? And he says, well, you go out and you get 3 people, and then they work under you, and then and then you get a percentage of, you get like, let's say like 10% of everything they ever sell for the rest of your life or whatever, right? And I'm like, okay, so how do we get the clients that actually buy the insurance? And they're like, oh, the people you're getting are the people who are buying insurance. I'm like, what if they don't want to buy the insurance then? Yeah. Are you selling a product? What are you doing? And that's when I quit. That's when it basically became very clear. Okay, this is a pyramid scheme.
Yeah,
because it had nothing to do with selling insurance at all. It's just, okay, you're going to buy some supposed insurance. Let's say you drop $6,000, right, that you want to invest in this. It's basically like a life term insurance. Basically something you would use for what's it called? Nursing homes, that sort of thing.
Okay.
And long-term life plan. That's what it is. My mistake. Anyway, so
you only pay once. You don't pay like
no, like interest, compound interest.
Okay.
That sort of thing. No, every year you put like $6K in there.
Wow.
Or whatever amount. I just picked that number. The point is that it's like, so we're gonna drop. So you're gonna have me. So you want me to drop? You're hoping that I'll buy into this insurance and get 40% of it or something, or 10% of it.
Yeah.
Right. And then I should then like get 3 other people to do that too. but really, we're not going to get any more clients. You're just feeding off of my money, and then I'm feeding off of their money, and they're feeding off. Like, it's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the reason why I bring this up was because, you know, he very clearly was trying to play into greed. You know, saying like, look, this, and that's how he opened. He's like, this is how much money people make within, you know, just by doing one commission a month. 100%. You know, you can make $4,000 a month. You know,
100%. It's so interesting. There's a law, and I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but we'll get to this at some point. But there's a law in this book called Hate the Free Lunch or something.
Yeah.
Despise the Free Lunch, where it's like anything that seems too good to be true isn't, right? It's kind of like, because I was driving back home one day.
I think it's too good to be true.
Anything that is too good to be true is too good to be true. Yeah. So I was driving home one day, and I'm kind of in the same position. I kind of wanted another little side job here and there and whatever. So I was driving home, and I saw a sign that says, part-time work or full-time work, whatever you want, and we'll pay you like $65,000 for part-time work.
Come on.
I was like, this is crazy. And I actually called the number. And it turns out to be one of those same kind of things, you know. It's a thing where they're playing on people's need to, or some people's want to be like, man, I want easy money fast.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I mean, you know, honestly, it could happen, but chances are it's just not out there.
It's, you know, I mean, I wouldn't shut down everything, but, you know, definitely think about what you're doing before you agree to anything. And
absolutely,
you know, definitely look
and be aware of the free lunch concept. You know what I mean? Be aware that things that tend to be too good to be true are too good to be true. You know what I mean?
There ain't no such thing as a free lunch.
Exactly.
No.
Well, but, you know, yeah.
You know, this is how it goes.
There's free dinner, though, sometimes, you know.
Sure.
I think this was great. We discussed law number 7 and law number 8. We did 6 last week.
Yeah.
It's a very riveting discussion. And for the 48 Laws podcast, I'm Rudy Malumba.
And I'm John Karp.
And we're out. Well, that was our take. What do you think? Email us at the 48 Laws of Power podcast at gmail.com.
We're on iTunes, YouTube, and Spotify.
Make sure to tune in every Monday for a new episode.